Hello and welcome to the Creative Community Podcast. This is the show where we interview local creatives and creative organisations. I am your host, Claire Beardraz. I am a creative freelancer, I am a spoken word performer and a creative arts therapist. And for today's episode, I'm joined by the one, the only Ali Harwood. Hi Ali, how are you?
Hi Claire, I'm pretty good. All the better for seeing you, and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, always. And for those listening, do you want to tell them a little bit about what you do? Because I know you have many hats that you wear.
Yeah, there are many hats, and on my bald head they are artist, poet, writer and teacher, but not always in that order. So we were chatting before we came inside, and it was, I said we were just chatting about what we've been doing today.
Yes.
So like even today I've been at in St Helens at Shirley Primary School, doing an assembly there this morning with Key Stage 1. That was really fun. So that's part of my art stuff. So with the art, I also do lots of paintings and so on, and I do illustrations, and I do commissions for various different organisations and individuals. As a poet, I run Liveabards, as you well know.
I do.
And you've come the last few times and done some really amazing stuff.
Thank you.
Particularly the last one, which was Happy, which I think you did a really a new poem there that you wrote specifically for that, which was really fantastic.
Yeah.
And quite a bit of a change as well.
Yeah, I think it's good to challenge writing. Yeah. So let's speak a bit about Liveabards, because as you mentioned, I've attended a few, but do you know, tell us a little bit more about the layout and the different themes that happen, because for me as a poet attending these events, I find them really useful.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because I think in my role as a teacher as well, I know that some people like some guidance, and some people just want to go their own way.
Yeah.
So like I've been running Liveabards for about just over 5 years now, and I think its reputation has grown within that time as well. And what I try and do is look for something that's happened on that day,
right,
and come up with a theme, basically.
Yeah.
So I think the first one that we did ages ago was like Pig. I think it's called Pig. Okay. And then we did Sun and various other things. The last one was Happy because it was Pharrell Williams' birthday.
Right.
So had to be happy. It was also the day on which Kurt Cobain was thought to have killed himself.
Right.
So we could have done something about that.
Right.
But I chose to go down the more sort of positive path. But yeah, we also for the last 2 years or more, we have a featured poet or featured bard every month. That's really good. They have like 10 to 15 minutes so it gives people who are kind of on the up in the Liverpool and Merseyside poetry scene to have a space to explore their craft a little bit. And although it's not a paid gig because Liveabards isn't funded at all, we just do it out of the love of our own hearts, basically. Yeah. It's still a good platform, I think. And I like having the themes because it makes it a proper event, I think. But also, I like it when people write to the theme because it makes you think, oh, that's good. But it's cool when people just go, no, I don't want to. I just want to write about something else. So I usually, I think on each event, I say, come and speak your truth and listen to others speak theirs. And that idea of listening is really important as well. Because I think it's really when you're hosting an event and when you're attending a poetry event, it's not just about you turning up and doing your thing.
Of course.
You are part of a community, and any, in my opinion, and people might disagree with this, but any true art it's a dialogue. There's something going on between you and the audience, and it's an interaction. It's not a passive process. It's an active process. So yeah, it's really I feel really honoured basically to be the host of Liveabards, and we just keep going basically. So the next one is Queens of the Anarchy, because I think I can't remember. There's it's a really difficult one because back in about 1,000 years ago there was an anarchy in England, and the two main protagonists in this anarchy were two queens called Matilda.
Right.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And I have to keep on reading back the same thing to go, which Matilda is this? Is this Matilda who's like the got Scottish ancestry as this Matilda
Yeah.
from France. So that's why it's Queens of the Anarchy, and that's going to be Chris Clark and Aaron Murdoch. So that'll be fun.
Nice. And have you been the sole sort of host and organizer for Live About Bards all these years then?
For the last 5 years, yeah.
Right.
But before that, it's a bit like Doctor Who, you know, when they kind of regenerate.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm the most recent regeneration.
Got you. Right.
So I don't think Jodie Whittaker is going to be taking over from me anytime soon. If it was like David Tennant, then it might be more popular. I don't know.
Possibly,
who knows?
yeah.
But yeah, I basically the guy that was running it beforehand, Steve Regan. He's a great poet, and he just wanted a bit of a change. So he asked me, "Do I want to take it over?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." But there've been other people that have run it before, or with him as well. So Tony Forshaw was involved in it as well, and Paul Harris,
Right.
and I think Shell Wright. But yeah, I basically was quite a regular there. And if I'm being honest, I was going through quite a tough time in my life at during that time, and it was quite a good space for me to put my focus. So I can recognise as well when people come and need to speak their truth and they're perhaps not in the best place. It's important to give them that space to express themselves and feel that they are heard.
Absolutely. I think that's really, really important as well. Like you were touching those points of community, but also listening to others. It's not just about, like you say, that passiveness of getting on stage, performing, and that's it. You know, it's about what happens during that, before that, and after that. And I find that when you engage in that sense of community with an art like spoken word or poetry, it's sort of, there's things to gain from it, right? Whether that's just a feeling of or response to that person's sort of piece, or whether that's, oh, I really love the way that was written, or I love the use of metaphor, or I love the imagery, maybe I want to write like that too. There's just so much to learn from it. Yeah,
I really agree with you, and I can see I've seen the development of people that have come. It's not just coming to Live at Bards, it's going to different things as well. But what I try and encourage in that atmosphere is that people will talk to each other as well. So I think it's quite friendly, quite open, and there's, like, you know, I'll have people that will say, "Oh, I didn't like that person's poem." It's like, yeah, fine, you didn't need to like it. There's going to be another one along in 5 minutes, so it's fine. And also, even in terms of the people that we have as our featured bards, I try and vary it a bit. So have different kinds of people from different backgrounds, and also, say, for example, there will be people will have particular issues in their life, but that's not the priority. The priority is them as an individual and who they are. So I like to focus on who they are, not what they are. And I find that then you feel that you can communicate more with people rather than go, "You won't understand this because you're not like me." It's more like we're humans together, and you might not completely get this, but you might get a bit of it. Yeah.
There's always aspects that people can grasp and understand, or can be like, I don't know exactly what that feels like, but I can feel from what you're saying or from what's happening in the space what it might feel like, right? Yeah. So it sounds like you have been intertwined in the poetry scene, I guess, for quite a while. Would that be right in saying?
Sort of in and out, really, because you know, I've done quite a lot in terms of poetry. So quite recently, I worked with Jay Vance Patel Dance down in Wolverhampton. So he's a contemporary dancer. So I've written a couple of pieces for him where he's danced with the poetry that I've produced. So one of them was called "I Am Your Skin," and it was about the being basically an LGBTQ plus man in a South Asian dance community, and exploring that, but also exploring how saris have been used over time and all that sort of stuff. So it's really interesting. It was good to write that poem with him, and that came after a piece which I did with him, which he asked me to do, called Yatra, which means journey. So I've got kind of, I really enjoy working with him. I work with lots of other dancers and other poets and things like that as well. So I work with Bishaka Saka quite a lot as well, who's traditional Bharatanatyam dancer, but also does contemporary dance. And now in her 70s, she just does some amazing things. So we work with her quite a lot, and the the poetry kind of overlaps into doing artwork as well. So and also in terms of the poetry, I was commissioned to do some paintings of some ships for Camel Laird over the water, of ships that have been used in the Battle of the Atlantic. So I did I painted these ships about a metre squared, and I had quite a tight deadline to do those. So those have been exhibited in various places around Liverpool and Merseyside. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to write some poetry about these as well. So I ended up writing a poem about each of the ships. There's a hymn that is like the sailors' hymn. For those in peril on the sea is one of the lines in there. So I kind of did it so it's scanned to that. So those paintings have been exhibited in Camel Laird. They've been exhibited in Birkenhead Priory, in the oldest standing building on Merseyside, which was built in 1150, and done like a poetry event there as well, which is really cool. So people could come in. I did my poem about the ships, but then people came and did theirs as well. I know I've gone off on one here a little bit, but the poetry comes in to a lot of places. So I just get on and do it.
It just sort of happened and you went with it, and then suddenly you look back and you're like,
I've got to do it. Yeah, and often it will be, I might be doing an artwork or something and going, I've got to write about this as well. So they interplay with each other, I would say.
What is that process like for you then, when you're sort of intertwining two different creative mediums? So like, for example, when you were writing a poetry piece that was then going to be almost like creatively danced and interpreted to, what is that like?
I think you just it's kind of, you've got to listen to the thing itself, rather than trying to put too much of yourself in there. Yourself is going to go into it anyway, whatever piece of artwork you do, but you have to listen to the point of it. What's the purpose of it, and then it will come through. So say for example, working with Javant, he knew what he wanted the piece to be about. So we had those conversations, and I'd write something and he'd go, yeah, I like that bit, I'm not sure about that bit, and I go, well, this is what I'm trying to do with this. So even things like the how it was written in terms of like it was I think it was an iambic hexameter, you know, da-dum 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 da-dum, but it had 108 iambs altogether, and 108 is quite important in terms of you know, if you've got your mala beads and you're counting those, 108, there are 108 beads sort of thing. So those kind of things, although I'm not going to be necessarily explicit in this is what I've done here, I know that it's helped me to direct what I'm writing about. So yeah, and it also depends with each piece that I do, the process is slightly different. But if I try and impose myself too much on it, it messes up. If I just kind of open up to the universe, I know that might sound a bit hippie-ish and so on, but if I open up to what it's asking me to do, then it tends to work a bit better. But I often I'm always going back and like changing a word here and changing a word there, just to make sure it's the poem, for example, is speaking to me. It's going, no, Ali, that's not quite right. That doesn't scan quite properly.
So it sounds like, I guess, collaboration is quite a key, important thing, especially when you're working with these different mediums. It's about, like you say, sort of having, I guess, an open mind to that work, and like you say, not putting yourself too much into it. Because I guess one trouble I know that I find personally, but I'm sure loads of other sort of poets can experience, is that when you write something so personal and you're so invested in, it can be so difficult to hear almost like constructive feedback or, you know, responses to it, because it's so sort of close. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right there. And sometimes some of the stuff that I write is a bit more not abstract, but it's it's impersonal in some ways. It's got me in it, but I'm not revealing that much about me necessarily. It's about things and events and so on, and ideas. So I mean, there's a lot that I've written that I haven't necessarily shared, or I think, is this the right time to share it? So I was at Jimmy's, was it yesterday or the day before? And it was a really good event, top of Bold Street. And I had a few poems that I was going to share, and one of them was was quite personal, which I shared on Valentine's night under the bridge in Sefton Park, because there was a Liverpool Arts Lab meet there, because there's a really interesting story about two lovers that were meant to meet on Valentine's night in the 1800s, and something happened to one of them. I won't go into the story now. People can look it up if they're interested. But I shared it under the bridge there, and I needed to, and I was around people from Liverpool Arts Lab, who are a really interesting bunch of people. And I was thinking about sharing that either last night or the night before, but I decided now is not the time. So sometimes you think, no, a bit too personal. So it depends. But poetry has helped me get through some dark times as well. And sometimes you need to just get it out in order to free up space for other things to live. And it doesn't necessarily make your situation any better, but sometimes you don't know what you think until you actually articulate it. So even in this conversation, I don't know what I'm talking about, but necessarily, but by having this conversation, it's clearer in my mind what I think, perhaps.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I was literally having this conversation earlier on in the week about, if we keep these thoughts up here, it's hard to understand them a little bit more. And that idea, that concept of taking all these thoughts out here and putting them into a different medium, whether that's been written or sung or moved, put into a movement, it's so useful to sort of understand or see it in a different way that maybe wasn't happening up here when it stays up there. And this thing about poetry as well, right? You can write so many different pieces, but some pieces are just to be kept for ourselves. Some pieces are to be performed. Some pieces might never even see daylight, or might not ever be looked back on again. But there was a moment in time where that was needed and that was important.
Yeah, and sometimes you might come back to it. It might sit in a box or sit in a book for a while, and you go, it's time for that one to come back out again. And that can be for your own poetry, and it can be for the poetry of others as well. Yeah. And, you know, in terms of when you're writing, one of the things that I really love doing is writing with like young people as well. So I do quite a lot of tutoring and quite a lot of teaching. So, you know, even in the last week, I've been working with a girl who I've been tutoring for a few years now, and we ended up doing writing a poem together about the Blue Coat. You know, the Blue Coat School. Now it's like an art space. The Blue Coat School is carried on, and it's in Wavertree now. But I got this quite famous lithograph, I think it is, that was created for St George's Day 1843 or something, and it's got like the kids coming out and playing in the band. So you've got loads of kids there, you've got other kids that are watching, you've got the teachers and the governors, and you've got the building, and you've got a couple of birds in the distance. So we kind of did a poem about the perspectives of each of those different participants in that scene, and I love doing it. And it was really good, because I didn't know entirely what I didn't know what we were going to come up with. But she came up with some really good stuff. And usually, or often, when young people are doing stuff like that, it's the first thing that comes into their mind. Yeah. That is it can be quite conversational. It doesn't necessarily have to form a complete sentence. And you go, yeah, that's it. You get it written down, and then it really resonates. Yeah.
Do you find that poetry and spoken word in some sense has become more accessible to younger people, and also, I guess, from a perspective of sort of class and being able to access it, there's always been that barrier? I mean, I know we were discussing earlier, I was saying to you, I'm not spoken word performer or poet who necessarily was really engaged in a literary term or constantly read. It was something that was used for me to sort of get through tough times, and then it eventually evolved into something that it is for me now. But have you found that sort of as the years have gone on and you're being able to work with young people and sort of have those experiences, that there's been a difference?
I think there's always space for both, and there's space for both to like coexist and to work with each other. So I'm neither just write your own stuff and don't look at anybody else's, or just look at the literary stuff. I'm very much the two combine, and don't see the need to be sniffy about things either way.
Yeah.
So I'm a great believer in, you can do it. Often as well, but you've also got to put the work in.
Of course.
So you can't just go, yeah, I'll just write that and it'll be fine. I just leave it as it is. Well, you can do, but I think things do need work, and you need to have that sense of like resilience and so on. Whether you're looking at the more traditional like poetry, or if you're doing something which is like for the stage, and both have like legitimacy. And if I'm around people that are quite literary and into their written poems, and then they're a bit sniffy about spoken word stuff, I'll get annoyed then. But equally, if I'm around people that are very much kind of spoken word and go, oh, I don't care about all the old stuff, I'll get annoyed then. So it's like, just respect. There's good and bad in both. So I kind of like both, and you can get bits and bobs from both. Definitely.
I know that I've noticed is that there's more blurred lines between like poetry and spoken word, because I feel like there are so many similarities between them, and like say they're good and bad in both. But I feel like there's so much to take from each other. I mean, I'm constantly twisting whether I'm saying I'm a poet or a spoken word performer or I'm this and that, because it's just so intertwined, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure what spoken word is, if I'm being brutally honest with you. I think poetry is poetry. So spoken word, you're speaking words, so it is. So, I sometimes like question, why do I call myself an artist, poet, writer and teacher? What's the difference between a poet and a writer? Do I get rid of the writer bit and just say poet, and then when I'm writing, narrative and stuff, then I'm doing it as a poet. So I think maybe I shouldn't get hung up on those words. I should get hung up on the words that I want to express myself with. But I love to, like we were saying before, if say for example, I've written a poem called Martha, about the last passenger pigeon, which is now, I think she's now stuffed in the Smithsonian Museum in the States. But there were millions of them for ages. But I can perform that poem with the book in front of me, but I've performed it a few times with Bishaka, where she is dancing the poem, and it just elevates it so much. Because she's just a brilliant dancer, but also it slows me down a little bit. And again, the dance between the words and her actions just makes it. I love it when she does that. So, I don't know how we got onto this bit, but
It's okay.
But So in terms of like the blurred lines and so on, I really want young people and older people just to go, if you want, it's there for you. But also, it might not be easy. You might get some knockbacks along the way, and you just have to keep on dusting yourself down and getting up. And sometimes I have to tell myself that as well. Yeah.
I know you were just touching on that, like you say you're a writer and a poet. You mentioned that you do illustration as well, and that they all quite intertwine. You have a few books, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I've done my Liverpool Liverbirds poetic picture book. So I had the poem written for that quite a while ago. But then my publisher was saying, right, you need to write a few more verses for that to make it from 7 to 10, which I did. But the illustrations took me ages. Took me a really long time, because the poem had been written before, but I wanted to make sure that the illustrations would really work with the text. so I would know there was that relationship there, and I'm really glad that I illustrated my own work because I know what I want to get across. And I've done some other books in the past. A long time ago, I did for the and this is ages ago. This is like 20 years ago. Did a book with the Diverse Heritage Trust, which was a Black Achievers mural booklet, and with that, wanted to make sure that I've got a range of different both British Black representatives and kind of people of African descent from other places as well, male and female and all that sort of stuff, but how the illustrations were quite important for that as well. And I've illustrated some work as well for Mantra Lingua as well, which is a dual language children's book publishers. So I illustrated The Wind and the Sun, you know, the Aesop's fable, about how they're vying to who's the strongest, the wind or the sun. And there's a traveller that's going along with a cloak, and they're both trying to get the traveller's cloak off. But I kind of just want, and this is quite a while back, I wanted to make it kind of more ethnically diverse in terms of how I portrayed it and so on. So that's always been quite important with how I work for decades and decades, you know, just being mindfully inclusive, but not in a patronizing way, being sort of genuine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So when it came to those illustrations, I'm wondering, do you find that when you provide illustrations, it sort of amplifies what you're writing? Or does the writing amplify the illustrations, or
part of the same thing? Part of the same thing. So, say for example, with the Live Birds book, things like the font is really important. Typeface, size of the font. Even I didn't do illuminated letters, but for each new page, there's an L in a different that I've done in a different way. But that it becomes an artwork in itself. So the book is an artwork. It's not a book. It's an artwork.
So it's not like writing and illustration, it's
how do they go together. And I also like to do stuff a lot by hand, so I don't like doing that much on the computer. I'll draw stuff by hand and then like scan it in or what have you, but I like the process of the physicality of drawing and painting and that kind of thing.
There's something really therapeutic about that, I find. Definitely. As well. I mean, on a sensory level, but also beyond that of physically writing, physically painting and drawing something.
I would agree.
I have a question, because I know you were saying you have decades and decades of intertwining all this work and, you know, throughout your life. Would you say that there's one thing you'd wished you had known when you were first starting to sort of delve into mixing your writing, your poetry, your illustration and things like that?
That's a really good question. I probably wish I'd just been a bit more proactive in a way, because even from when I was very young, I would
Just pause it. Okay, resume it again. No.
That's a really good question. I think I probably would tell myself just to go for it a bit more, because I think you end up, or what I ended up doing was, you know, I went to university and so on, and then tried to kind of make it as an artist and a creative and so on after I'd left uni, so in my early 20s, and then kind of hit a bit of a brick wall, to be honest, just in terms of keeping myself financially stable and so on, really. So I trained as a teacher and so on. So through my time as a full-time teacher, I was still doing a fair amount of creative stuff, but the teaching was sucking me pretty dry. In terms of time. So I was just tired all the time and just working very long weeks. So in about 2016, 2017, I kind of decided to jump off and go, right, okay, I'm going to try combining these different things, these different aspects. So I still do quite a lot of teaching, I do a lot of tutoring, but it means that I've got a lot more irons in the fire, and I think
Right.
I'm actually a lot better teacher now than I was when I was immersed in it. But it's nice that I've still keep my oar in, and I'm still tutoring a lot, because I find that kind of keeps me stable. The work in education.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about finding that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and you never find it, because you're always on a balance. You're always going a little bit too far this way, a little bit too far that way. You have to bring yourself here, bring yourself there, and because if you're doing jobs which are short term, then you can think, okay, this is going really well. Then something will come to an end, something else will pop up. So it's trying to plan a little bit ahead, but probably not too much. That's probably what works well for me. I like having like projects to do, and things like that.
Yeah, it's like things to look forward to, but also things in the present moment that you can also just enjoy and be immersed in. Like you say, you essentially sort of rebalancing it, and as you say, it's a continuous, ever-changing rebalance, right? But even that small adjustment within regards to teaching has allowed you to become, as you said, like a better teacher. It has a huge impact on every aspect, doesn't it, of your life and how we intertwine it all
Definitely
together.
Yeah.
I had one final question for you.
Go for it.
And for anyone listening right now, anyone who might perhaps want to start up poetry, or perhaps might have other skill sets like illustration and writing and want to combine that all together, what advice would you give to someone?
I would say literally just do it. Just do it, and get on and be your own hero, if you know what I mean. Act heroically. So, like if you wake up and you're feeling rubbish, you don't want to get up and all that sort of stuff, just think, right, today I'm gonna act as if I might be heroic, and I'm gonna do what I was sent here to do. And give it a go. And some people might try and dissuade you from doing it. That's fine. You can listen to them if you want, but keep going and kind of listen to your heart,
Right.
And give it a go, and you'll find a path. At the moment I'm working with quite a few children who are in foster care, and I started tutoring, looked after children a few years ago, and it's something now that I'm really sort of passionate about, is to make sure that these young people get a good start in life, and go right and try and introduce them to the buildings of the city, the library, the museums, all that sort of stuff, and go, this is yours. Okay. Don't just go outside and go, well, that's not for me, that's for other people. And in the same way, if you want to write a poem, write a poem. I think there's a song by Nick Cave, which I always put on if I'm feeling a bit like down. I know Nick Cave can sometimes be a bit depressing for some people, but for me, he's not. He said, if you've got a field that don't yield, brother, just get up and hoe it. And it's just like, just get on and do it, because you will find you feel better for having done it. That would be my advice. Just get on and do it.
Amazing advice. Yeah, I think that's so important. It's been lovely having this discussion with you, Ali. I feel like we've covered so many different topics, and I know I've definitely been taking a lot from this discussion myself, and how I intertwine the many hats that I might wear in the creative sort of field that I'm in as well. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Claire. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope I haven't over-talked.
Oh, no, never, no such thing. Thank you to everyone who has been listening to today's episode. I want to also give a massive shout out to LVP Online for allowing this podcast to take place, and for all the resources around that. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It lets us know if you're enjoying this and if we should continue to do more episodes. Obviously, if you're listening to this auditory, then we also have a video version online, and if you're seeing this on a video version, then you can also access an audio version on Spotify, Apple Music, and all those other platforms as well. Thank you again. I've been Claire Beardraz, and if you want to follow me and keep up to date with any projects that I have, my @s on social media are all Claire Beardraz, so that's where you can find me. Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and thanks again, Ali.
Thank you, Claire.